This is a story of political and psychological warfare that took place in front of your very eyes over the course of the past decade. As the only person in the entire world capable of telling you this story, I know that I have to, as it has the potential to change the timeline we live in. In this video, I'm going to explain to you why Leffen is a disease that can be expected to fully erode the Smash community as well as several other esports communities within the next 10 years. It will also show how the esports universe provides the perfect platform for criminology. There's a quote that goes, "The greater the crime perpetrated by the leadership, the less likely the people will ever believe their leaders capable of perpetrating such an event." That is, unfortunately, a Hitler quote, but it's one that's very applicable to the current situation. There's only one type of society in which these disconnects exist, and that is a totalitarian society. If you look at the current state of the Smash community, it is in line with the totalitarian regime, and that is entirely because of Leffen. A dead giveaway of Leffen's intentions is the fact that he blocks anyone who disobeys him on Twitter, to the point that he probably has thousands of people blocked. When you think about how dangerous this strategy can become over time, it should actually be illegal. When you think about the effect pest control has on crowd psychology, it deserves to be illegal. Yet another thing I've noticed about Leffen is his Discord screen name, which is 2 dashes. This gives him alphabetical priority over everyone else. Leffen uses a strategic one to make people aware that he's present. Aside from controlled rhetoric and surveillance, the status quo of Melee is totalitarian in several other ways. The state terrorism I mentioned earlier serves a purpose, and that purpose is to instill fear in a population. Once you realize that all the strategies I just listed are emanating from the same person, it becomes clear that a handbook is being followed. The same exact person then floods the community with censorship, propaganda, and surveillance that we've come to accept as the norm. People will often use avatars of anime characters that represent their inner beliefs, which is why I need to raise an issue with something. Why did Leffen used to use an avatar of Light Yagami from Death Note back in 2016? If you understand who Light Yagami is, then it makes all too much sense when you consider everything else that I've told you. Light is a brilliant high school student on the outside, but an infamous political criminal on the inside whose goal is to become the god of the new world. He's able to remain undetected for many years by outwitting everyone in his way. Essentially, Death Note is the story of a totalitarian regime that ends up casting darkness over the entire planet. The story that's unraveling right before our very eyes is strikingly similar to Death Note. The Death Note is a book that can be used to issue death sentences simply by writing someone else's name down. Should this tool fall into the wrong hands, it would terrorize an entire society. The funny thing is, Leffen is basically trying to turn his phone into the Death Note. Through the use of modern technology and a good understanding of crowd psychology, it's actually possible to create a Death Note nowadays, and people need to be wary of that. If you look at the avatars and professional photos that Leffen has used over the years, there's something in common with many of them. They're pitch black. Pitch black in terms of not only color, but tone as well. He has used avatars of demonic characters and pictures of himself grinning deviously, facing away from the camera while wearing a long black trench coat, being covered in shadows, etc. The Smash community lets Leffen play this off as though it's a villain persona, but what they fail to realize is that this all started long before Leffen was anyone relevant in the scene. The next thing to know is that Leffen is technically not a dark triad, but a dark tetrad. The Dark Tetrad is a slightly modified form of the triad that doesn't get talked about as much. Not all dark triads are sadists, but Leffen certainly is. So how do I know that Leffen isn't just a sadist, but a dark triad as well? For one, the dark triad is the motivating factor behind the totalitarian behavior I described earlier. The article lists plenty of strategies Leffen uses on a regular basis if you scroll through his Twitter feed. The video you're watching is blatantly insincere just based on the way Leffen raises his voice. He's speaking in a high-pitched voice because he knows that he needs to appear friendly and charitable in this moment, and he doesn't actually feel those emotions. We can't forget that this is the same person who was once banned for being a chronic liar with a manipulative personality, and that this slip-up isn't merely a coincidence. When I beat Leffen at Genesis 7, I was wearing a red pair of Adidas pants with white stripes on them. These pants would become synonymous with my run at that tournament. A few months after Genesis 7, someone sent me a picture they took of Leffen streaming. Leffen was wearing a red Adidas shirt with white stripes on its sleeves while editing a digital controller's button layout. Again, this wasn't a coincidence. It was a psychopath's way of showing that he wants revenge. Once you realize why the people behind Deep Leffenbot found Leffen's personality so fascinating, it's actually a lot more dystopian than it looks. This triggers narcissistic rage, which when a narcissist goes insane and becomes extremely violent. Narcissistic rage happens at the end of Death Note when the police force finally close in on Light Yagami, the mastermind behind years of political crimes that terrorize the world. In real life, the way narcissistic rage works is it has 2 phases. The first phase is an angry outburst, and the second phase is a self-aimed wrath. This means that the narcissist will actually degrade themselves as to suggest that the way they've been insulted is preposterous. Leffen did this toward the very end of his rage when he tweeted a picture of his face edited onto a Dementor, which is a creature from Harry Potter that drains peace, hope, and happiness from the world around it. Although people saw this tweet as sarcastic, it was actually a lot more telling than they realized. The way this generation got here in the first place was through propaganda. TSM and Red Bull committed one of the biggest sins in esports history when they decided to erase the truth about Evidence.zip and lie to people instead. The documentaries, interviews, and articles that these companies have put out in the past several years are nothing short of the most aggressive brainwashing campaign I've ever witnessed. Every single piece these companies have ever put out about Leffen will be remembered as political terrorism. Leffen is attempting totalitarianism, and that's going to become clearer and clearer as this video goes on. For now, I'll be listing totalitarianism as the first of many charges against Leffen. The fact that I can look at the state of Smash in 2021 and reasonably compare it to totalitarianism means that the prophecy has become all too real. As I said earlier, Leffen would eventually transition into a full-fledged political con artist. The goal of his cons can be summed up in one phrase: socioeconomic resource transfer. Leffen's goal here is to drain his adversaries socioeconomically in order to further secure his position. This is a standard strategy for achieving totalitarianism. In Nazi Germany, for example, Hitler purged a large group within the Nazi Party in 1934. He viewed the people within this group as potential threats to his ascent, and so he needed them gone. Surely enough, this scheme was instrumental in Hitler's rise. In December 2017, Leffen posted a video of himself stabbing a pancake that had a green Jigglypuff drawn on it. This video tells you that Leffen desperately wanted to get rid of HBox. It's identical to when he bought a red Adidas shirt shortly after losing to me at Genesis. Stalking and smear campaigning represents the highest level of desperation on the psychopath's end, and it's exactly what Leffen did in both of these situations. On July 19, 2018, Leffen referred to Snowy as his slave. There's a term called flying monkeys. People don't realize this, but Leffen is the real reason HBox had a crab thrown at him at Pound 2019. Leffen incited violence without ever directly inciting violence. Last summer, the Smash community witnessed its darkest point when it found out that many of its own were sexual predators. People didn't know what to believe when the victims first started coming out, but before you knew it, the whole world was watching. Unfortunately, if there's anything last summer proved, it's that the Smash community is twice as naive as it thought it was. This is because, just as sexual predators can live among us, the Dark Triad can live among us too. I then brought up the fact that on top of everything else Leffen's done, hijacking a Me Too movement isn't a joke, and that Leffen turned out to be an actual threat to society just like Evidence.zip prophesized. C agreed, adding that Leffen potentially deserves to be in jail seeing as how he tries to ruin other people's lives and reputations. I'm inclined to agree with C here for anyone wondering. I then raised the possibility that Leffen studied totalitarian handbooks such as Mein Kampf, since he had to have learned this from somewhere. C agreed that it was possible. Hey everyone, thanks for making it to the end of the video, or if you skipped here, that's totally fine too, since I'll be recapping a bunch of the information that I've given to you throughout this video. So the first thing that I want to start by showing you is a slide of a dystopian society. So the first way that you know that you're living in a totalitarian state is that the person with the highest follower account in this community does not allow you to view his Twitter account. Just as I told you that top players are basically under surveillance, meaning Leffen is keeping track of who poses a threat to his rhetoric or market share, Leffen is doing the same for the masses as well. The masses are also under surveillance, meaning he scans social media to make sure that the masses are acting in line with the way that he wants them to behave. And this creates fear. This is called a menticidal assault. The same person is then flooding the community with propaganda as well. So now this propaganda starts to be enforced as law. The next step that you know you're living in a totalitarian state is that Leffen is both feared and loved. They fail to realize that they are being hoarded and recruited yet again. They don't even suspect that this is yet another socioeconomic scam and that Leffen is walking away as the winner for the millionth time. They don't see that there's someone in the background saying that Leffen actually deserves to be put in jail for the false statements that were made about him, saying that Leffen is utilizing crowd psychology in order to control massive droves of people. They don't see any of this. All they see is this illusion that they've been taught to believe is real. They don't understand that the community is now participating in massive political fraud and that these videos are receiving 1 million hits and the entire world at this point is being deceived. Samox has actually been subdued. Samox is now the head minister of propaganda for the regime. To conclude the video, there is no denying that something massively evil has infested the Smash community. Believe it or not, you are actually witnessing a modern-day totalitarian regime. And so I've come to inform the Smash community of these injustices in the hopes that it will spark change. So now that the Smash community knows the truth, I think it's time for us to take back the free world. Thank you for watching.